Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight for our very first seminar here in Hernando County. This is Human Trafficking 101. So tonight, Alan is going to be sharing what human trafficking is and what it's not. A lot of misconceptions and a lot of misinformation, and he's going to be able to shed light on that. This is going to be different than our monthly meetings. Our monthly meetings are, a little bit more of a round table, but this is really going to be where we sit and we listen and we learn. And welcome for those of you who are joining us on Facebook Live. Thank you so much. I hated that you're not able to be here with us, but at least you're able to join us this way. So tonight, as Alan is getting ready to come up, we also have two other folks that I would like to come up and share a couple of things about Warrior. Warrior 321, first of all, was started by Tony, then Martin, but now Rivera, and Alan Wilkett, and gosh, it was more than 3 years ago. Yeah. I've been involved for now 3 years. Yeah. And so they were going for a year or two at least before I heard about it. Tony invited me, and so the monthly awareness meetings that have been consistent from the beginning are the last Monday of every month. A lot of you here are faithful and you come every month to that. But from that also, what we gave birth to next was our action committee. So when I started coming and listening to Alan regularly, I would leave the meetings mad for the information that we would learn about these atrocities that are happening in our own backyard. And I would go home and talk to my husband, and what are we gonna do about this? Can't just do laundry now, can't just make dinner and act like everything is okay. It's not okay. Hernando County is so small. And it is happening here because he gives some very real statistics. And as a mother of adult children, but a grandmother of 4 precious babies, like you guys have children and grandchildren here in the room too, gosh, it makes you start thinking about things on a different level. It's one thing for things to happen in California. It's horrible. It's still horrible, but it's there. It's altogether different knowing that it's here. It's also altogether different knowing that Hernando County has slid up the ladder for one of the counties that is heavier in the trafficked counties of all 67 counties in Florida. We were told a statistic. I'm still waiting to get actual confirmation on that. A couple of years ago, we were 33 out of 67. I mean, I would prefer to be 67, but 33 isn't horrible, I guess, until we got a new statistic, which again, I'm waiting for confirmation from that, was number 7. 7. We went from 33 to 7 in 18 to 24 months, and that is an atrocity. And so what can we do about that as Hernando County residents? Well, that's what we're going to learn in this 2-day training. So tonight is going to be the teaching of what it is, what it's not, and then Thursday is going to be more of, and now what can we do? Now our action committee meets the second Monday of every month. We are at Perkins, okay, and for nice little gimme, free pie that day if you get an entree. So I say that laughing, but sometimes people come because they're like, well, there is going to be free pie, and so they come. And then they want to stay. But so we meet for, because what we do there is we follow up to the awareness that Alan gives us, and then we brainstorm ways to make that awareness of information actionable in our county. I personally, my name is Angel Camanzuli. I tell people, it's funny but also true, I'm the short owner of Tadeo Electrical Contractors. My husband's the tallest electrician in probably 3 counties. And my husband also very upset about these things that are happening in our county. And human trafficking spans across, it affects all people. Well, in trades, it's not just, when you think about human trafficking, a lot of times somebody will go immediately and only to sex trafficking. Well, that's not the case. Again, this is some things that we're gonna learn tonight. So, but the labor trafficking, trades for years and years. I mean, we talked, it was joked about, just go to Home Depot or Lowe's. Didn't realize what we were saying, what we were not thinking about what was actually happening. You know, when you go down and you pick up a handful of people at a Lowe's or a Home Depot to come and work, and they don't get paid what they're supposed to get paid, and you don't even know, well, we do now, the kind of environments that they go back to, and that the money that they work so hard for is taken from them. We don't want to be a part of that. So one of the things the Action Committee put together is a campaign called Trades Against Trafficking. And so we're going to be uniting different tradesmen here in Hernando County and coming up with real-time solutions for what we can do as people in trade to battle against this very, very real epidemic in our county. So thank you so much for listening to me. Scott, I would love for you to come up and so I can introduce you as well. Scott Buckley is also a local business owner. He owns Stone Point Technology, and he's in the IT world. And Scott, how long have you been part of Warrior?
I've been part of Warrior it's been at least 2 years now. Same thing, Tony got me in with the promise of free pie. Anybody who's seen me from the side knows that's true. But working in cybersecurity, I see a lot of it because a lot of the cyber criminals that I'm dealing with, aside from the management of that organization, a lot of those are trafficking victims, both here and abroad. Because they get pulled into the same way it happens here with you mentioned the people at Home Depot is the debt bondage.
Yeah.
So essentially they get brought in on the promise of the job, and it's like, okay, well, we're not, now we have your papers, and so they may not be under the thumb immediately directly of the trafficker, but they are still under their control because they're dictating, hey, this is where you're going to live. This is what you're going to do. You're going to work for me. You're going to work for a very small wage, and you're going to pay me rent, and you're going to pay back all this money that I spent to bring you here.
Yeah, they never get out of it.
And they never get out of it.
Cycle.
So.
Yeah. Scott's also part of our Action Committee as well. So thank you very much for being part of this.
It's been my pleasure.
Very, very much. Also, we'd like to bring up Alyssa. Alyssa is our very first intern. Alan almost didn't know what to do with her at first. But Alyssa has done some incredibly important work. I'm going to scoot this over. And so Alyssa, I'd like for you to share with everyone and the world what it is that you've done as our intern. You're probably going to scoot in.
Hello everybody, my name is Alyssa Joler. I graduated from St. Louis University, and I worked on some research that Alan had come up with SMOCs with to hold our legislators accountable. There is so many ways that we're trying to, you have survivors, you have our police officers, our people who are working at shelters, everywhere that are trying to come together, and then they hit a roadblock because the laws are not backing up our police officers. And if we're not putting in the laws to protect our children, our families, everybody, then we can't do anything. So Alan came up with this great idea for me to go through each person, how they voted, what have they been doing to stop this, or what are they not doing? And that's what I've been compiling. I've compiled over 1,000 pages, and I'm continuing to go, of each person from 2021 till now. And it doesn't matter. This isn't politics. This is not anything that matters about anything other than who you are and what you're doing to stop this issue.
Yeah.
So that is where I come in. And I think it's so important just to sit here and really listen to people. I had the honor of interviewing a survivor, and knowing that just speaking to them and making them feel seen is a huge step towards everything. Because you need to understand where they've come from, because every single survivor has their own story. It's not one cut and dry thing of how somebody has gone through something. You have to listen to them and see what barriers did they come to when they were trying to speak out for themselves, and also see what the law did or didn't help them with. There's been a lot of issues in our hotel industries And I think that that's a really big one that I've come across, that the hotel industries or, you know, other ways that they just can't get their justice for everything that they were put through. And it doesn't matter who you are, what age you are, you should not be putting somebody through that. So here I am to just kind of let you guys know everything that's been worked on and try to continue to push at that, because we shouldn't be going left, right. Everybody needs to come together. We're called the United States. We need to unite on this issue.
Amen. That's good. Thank you so much. Well, without further ado, I would like to welcome up to the front Alan Wilkett. He has been part of law enforcement in Pasco County for well over 30 years, something like that.
30 years total.
Yeah, that's longer than most marriages. And and at this point, we can at least call you. With Facebook, we could probably call you an international speaker, because there have been times where we've had people from overseas that have watched our Facebook Lives. But you do a lot of traveling. You do a lot of educating to a broad, a wide range of businesses and just people who are interested. So thank you so much for the hard work that you've done,
Sure.
all of the groundwork that you've laid, and now educate us on what human trafficking is.
Awesome. Thank
All
you,
right.
Angela. Thank you so much. Thank you for that big applause. Kim's the only one who I feel a lot better with a lot of applause. I just want to, first of all, thank everybody for being here. I wish the room was completely packed because the information you're going to hear tonight is going to be critical. Although the information tonight, most of you sitting here who come to our monthly meetings have heard this already. You've heard certainly bits and pieces of it. But I think sometimes it's good maybe to just kind of back up a little bit and just kind of reestablish things like what is human trafficking, what does it look like, how does it present itself, so on and so forth. And we're going to cover that tonight. So we're going to talk about the problem tonight. On Thursday night, I'm very excited about being here tonight, but I'm very excited about being here Thursday, because Thursday what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how do we protect ourselves? How do we protect our families? What tools are out there to protect ourselves against what you're going to hear about tonight, which is human trafficking. So Thursday night will be an amazing night of education, but it's going to be actual tools that will allow us to protect ourselves, protect our families, protect our community, protect those around us. Critical night to be here on Thursday night. So what I am going to ask you to do is, when you leave here tonight, is to go and call 8 or 10 people and say, hey, come with me on Thursday night and be a part of this. It's important that our families are protected. I'm very concerned because, as you will hear a little bit later when we have a survivor who will share her experience with us tonight, you'll hear not just the experience of a survivor, but some of the areas that she's involved in now, which has to do with working with federal law enforcement to recover kids, working with state law enforcement to recover kids, working with local law enforcement to recover kids. And when I say recovered kids, what I'm saying is our kids are the prime target of these pedophiles and these predators that are out there in our community. So it's incredibly important that we get here on Thursday night. We learn some of these tools, how to protect our family, how to protect our community. So that's a little bit. I also want to take a moment to thank Angel and Scott for their work tonight, but not just tonight, but also the Warrior Walk that we had a Saturday or two ago. They did amazing work there, getting that all done. I see T-shirts up here that needs bodies in them. But if you take one without paying me, I will arrest you. So they're up here and they're available, and you can see them. I tried to give them away before, but here they are. And there's bracelets on your table. Please take not just one for yourself, but take 2 or 3 of those and give those to someone. They're great bracelets. They have, of course, ours on there, but I think on the inside, if they also have some information on the inside, but if not, we will make sure that you get the information on who to contact as well. So we are going to talk about Human Trafficking 101, what I call 101, the basics of human trafficking tonight. So again, most of you have heard a lot of this already, but I'm going to put it, I was trying to remember, I think it was Vince Lombardi, the great football coach of the Green Bay Packers many years ago, who most people kind of talk about the grandfather of modern football. But one time he walked into a room, and I'll never forget, Lou Holtz had referred to this one time before, and a great coach in his own right, Lou Holtz, but he had walked into a room of men, young, strong men that were in their 20, 21, 22, all the way up to 32, 33 years of age, prime of their life, strong men who had probably played football all the way since the Little Leagues. They had played on playgrounds, and they had played football, and they had went through middle school, and then they went to high school, and then college, and now they're pros. So these pros, you would think, really would know how to play football. But Vince Lombardi walked in there with a football and slammed it down on the stage at the first meeting of a year of these pros that are sitting around, and he says, "Gentlemen, this is a football." Now that sounds weird, right? These are men who have been playing with that pigskin for many years. They knew the ins and outs. They knew dive plays and off-tackle plays, and they knew linebacker schemes, and they knew all the stuff about. But he said sometimes it's good to go back and just go back to the basics. So tonight, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to go back to the basics and talk about what is human trafficking. Now, human trafficking defined. You see up on the screen, and this thing is going to have a hard time keeping up with me because I like to walk around. So I'm going in and out of the frame. So those of you that are on live Facebook, I'm still here. I just may not be seen on the camera because I do walk around quite a bit. But what is human trafficking? And you see up on the screen, you see the definition that came from the United Nations. So the United Nations gave us this definition. You see it at the very top. And this really was kind of the launch of defining human trafficking. And let me just say this to you, and you're going to see this in just a moment, that prior to the year 2000, there was no crime of human trafficking. Now, the question that I always ask is, was human trafficking happening? Was human trafficking happening before 2000? Of course it was. We have had, in fact, I'll put it to you like this, we have had human trafficking since the beginning of time, right? Ever since mankind's been around, there's been somebody taking advantage of someone else for a commercial gain. They've been exploiting the vulnerabilities of another person for a commercial gain. So when you talk about human trafficking has been around since the dawn of time, but we didn't have a crime. And Anjo mentioned to you earlier, I've been in law enforcement for a little over 30 years now. I can tell you that some of the crimes that I investigated early in my career, that today I would investigate them as human trafficking crimes, but back then I had no such statute. And we had to kind of come up with a different type of crime or criminal code to kind of match that, knowing it was criminal, just trying to figure out a way to make sure that they were held accountable. So there was no such thing as human trafficking as a criminal activity before the year 2000. So human trafficking is relatively young, right? It's only about 25 years old as a criminal statute. The United Nations gave us our first kind of definition. They had something called the Palermo Protocol that kind of got together and talked about human trafficking, came up with the definition that you see. The one thing I want you to note on this screen is the second paragraph there, and that it's not smuggling. For those of us who have worked in this space for a long time, that's one of the myths that is out there, that smuggling and human trafficking are the same thing. And they're actually two different criminal activities. Now, do you think that smuggling can turn into trafficking? Of course, and many times it does. So many times smuggling turns into trafficking, but they're two different crimes. So let me give you a couple of ways to determine which is which. Smuggling is a crime against the border. So if there is a sovereign border and something unauthorized comes across that border without proper authorization, that's a smuggling charge. And that can be dope, it can be guns, it can be money, it can be contraband, it can be weapons, and it can be human beings. When they come across a sovereign border without proper authorization, It is a smuggling charge. Trafficking is a crime against the person. It's an exploitation of an individual, which means, now I want you to catch this because this is not understood very often, that trafficking can happen without somebody being moved. In fact, and you'll see a stat here in just a minute, in fact, and we'll talk more about it on Thursday, NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, has now determined that the fastest growing segment of human trafficking is familial trafficking, which means families are trafficking their own kids. They're trafficking their own relatives. A crime, a case that I had many years ago, before we had the trafficking statute, which again I would charge with trafficking today, but involved two uncles trafficking their niece. And their niece was only 6 or 7 years old. By the time law enforcement got involved, it was she was now 8 years old, and but was being trafficked by her two uncles. Men that should have been protecting her were trafficking her as a little birthday date. An advocate from the Tampa Bay area tells the story of a case that she had many years ago where a grandmother was trafficking her own granddaughter at the age of 4 for crack cocaine. Had an addiction and was trafficking a 4-year-old granddaughter. So where were they being trafficked? Right out of their own homes. So it doesn't require movement to have trafficking, where smuggling requires movement. So those are a couple ways that you can use to determine trafficking versus smuggling. So smuggling is a crime against the border. Trafficking is a crime against the person. Just understand that myth that's out there as well. Trafficking is an exploitation crime. Smuggling is a movement crime. So just understanding that, I think it's important. Here's where I wanted to kind of go with 2000. So in the year 2000, our Congress federally passed a law called, and I want you to be able to see this on the screen. So I'm moving out of the screen on purpose this time. So the Trafficking Act of 2000, this is called the TVPA, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. This gets renewed by Congress about every 3 years or so. In fact, last year they reauthorized half of it, which I don't quite understand. Right now, the government is shut down. And somebody asked a question the other day. They said, "Has anybody can you even tell?" And I thought that's probably a pretty sad indictment of how bad our federal government is working. They can be furloughed and be out of business, and nobody really knows. But the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000 is where we framed up for the first time human trafficking as a crime. And basically what it covered was 3 different parts: the act, the means, and the purpose. That is the TVPA. The act, what is done, is recruitment, and I'm not going to read all of these, but transportation, obtaining of a person, movement of a person, receipt of a person. The means, or how is it done? You can see all the criminal elements that are there. What I will tell you that is in Florida, for a criminal act to be proven, you have to prove one of 3 elements: force, fraud, or coercion. And I think that's so important. You have to be able to prove force, fraud, or coercion. If you don't have one of those mechanisms, you don't have trafficking. Now, let me define that for you for a minute. Force is pretty easy, right? I beat somebody, I whip somebody, I burn them with a cigarette to get them to do something. I make them do something by force. So force is pretty, fraud is pretty evident as well. I promise you one thing and I make you do something else. I promise you a job at Disney if you come into the United States, but when you get here I put you in a brothel. I promise you a job at Disney, but when you get here I put you into a different type of occupation that you didn't sign up for. That's fraud. I promise you one thing, deliver another. What is coercion? So coercion is kind of that unique criminal mindset or criminal element that probably gives people the most problem. What is coercion? Well, coercion just on its surface is manipulation. So I manipulate you to do something. I deceive you into doing something. I give a threat against a family member to get you to do something. I threaten your pet and tell you that if you don't go dance tonight at a private party and be trafficked at a private party, I'm going to kill your dog. I am coercing you to do something that otherwise you wouldn't do, but I'm manipulating you by using what is sometimes a third-party leverage. So we have a friend that tells the story, and I'm not going to tell her story tonight, but she talks about how that her pet was used, how her special needs child was used at times. So all of these things were manipulating her to do something that normally she would not do, but they were coercing her to do it by manipulating a third party, which in this case was a special needs child. So you can talk about force, fraud, or coercion. However, one caveat to that is, if the victim is a minor, you do not need force, fraud, or coercion. You don't need the middle part of this statute if it's a minor. If it's a minor, here's what it is. If this is done and there's a commercial value attached to it, you have trafficking if the victim is a minor. So why is that? Why would the federal statutes talk about force, fraud, or coercion not being involved if it's a minor? Because a minor can't consent. So the fact that a minor cannot consent to it, if there's a commercial value attached to that sexual activity, or in Florida, a labor activity, you have trafficking. So just remember that as a minor. That's the carve out of the TVPA is when it's a minor. So here's some of the forms of human trafficking. And I think this is important to talk about. Forced labor, sweatshops, obvious. Agriculture, obvious. Florida has orange groves and strawberry fields and sugar fields down in South Florida. All of those are subject to a forced labor component. Probably one of the biggest cases made in Florida, at least for many years, was the Immokalee case. So Immokalee, which is down South Florida, in the lettuce fields there, the sugarcane fields there. Big federal case was made, and they call them the Immokalee Group, who now come out and talk about labor trafficking. If you ever hear them, get a chance to hear them talk about what they went through, it is brutal how they were kept in the back of trucks, chained to floors sometimes, or locked inside box trucks. Not necessarily, but on a little cot where they would have to stay there all night chained. I mean, the stories they tell is just heart-wrenching of what human beings were put through for this forced labor component. So agriculture would be big. Manufacturing, construction, restaurants, hotels. One that's not on here that I'll just mention to you, Asian nail salons. Huge.
Wow.
Huge. I've been in probably most of them, if not all of them, in Pasco County, looking at the operations that they had there. And many of those are going to be Chinese women in particular, sometimes Korean. One case we had where they were Colombian women, actually in a barber shop, but they have Koreans, but mainly Chinese women who are brought here under a visa, and they're under a debt bondage that you heard about a little bit earlier. So Asian nail salons, big trafficking operations as well. Difficult to make a case out of it because they don't perceive themselves as being victimized. They feel like it's better here than where they came from, but they are under a debt bondage, which technically puts them into a forced labor component. Commercial sex brothels, the internet, we'll talk more about that Thursday in particular. IMBs, illicit massage businesses, massage parlors, huge. Do we have any IMBs in Hernando?
Oh yeah. 54 the last time.
Oh, yes, we do.
54.
One of the things that I've heard one time we talked about strip clubs being nightclubs and strip clubs being a commercial sex operation, which they are. And again, I've been in, and I have to always qualify that. I've been in every strip club in Pasco County. And then I have to kind of stop and go, no, it was for work. I promise you it was for work. I oftentimes talk about my daughter called me one time. We were out on an operation late at night. Vice was out. We were all out doing a strip club operation. And my daughter called me like 10 o'clock at night. And she's an attorney out west now. But she called me and she goes, hey, Dad, what are you doing? And I said, oh, I just left one strip club and heading to another. And there was this big, long pause on the end. And my daughter was like, Dad?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah. She goes, okay, I know you're working, but that's probably not something you should tell your daughter. And I said, you're probably right. I didn't even think about that. But being in the strip clubs for these operations, they're sex shops. They just are. They're also drug shops, but they're definitely sex shops. But the massage parlors, the IMBs, the illicit massage businesses, absolutely sex shops. And so we have those. I hear people all the time talk about, well, at least we don't have strip clubs in Hernando. And we don't. And that's a good thing. But there was one just a mile down the road here, on my side of the county, my county, in Pasco. It did burn down. And I have to tell people, just because I smell like smoke, I didn't have anything to do with it. So I'm on Facebook.
You are.
All right, I'll get sued tonight. So you had one right here close, which was where most of the Hernando folks would come down into that club. So the point being is, you have these opportunities for the sex trafficking to happen in things that sometimes we don't think about. And even if you didn't have any of this, no private houses that were being used as brothels, and I can almost guarantee you there are. Escort agencies. You say there's no escort agencies in Hernando. Have you ever been on one of the escort? Well, I hope not. Have you ever been on one of the escort buying sites? And I'm not going to disclose what they are, but the popular ones that are out there, I can promise you that there are women that are being sold in Hernando County off of those websites. Now, maybe they're traveling up from Tampa to get here, but I don't know. In calls and out calls, whatever that looks like. The point being is, we do have it happening right here in Hernando. Now, thankfully, we have groups like this. We have law enforcement that's very concerned about this. We have groups like this that are very concerned. We have you that are concerned. We have you on Facebook who are concerned about this. And that's the first step in making sure we don't turn into something that we really don't want our children to be raised in. And so understanding these forms of human trafficking, and then involuntary servitude in Florida, we typically wrap that over into forced labor, but that's going to be your private homes, au pairs, babysitters, typically going to be foreign based. They go into wealthy homes or homes that have live-in babysitters or au pairs, and oftentimes that can turn into an involuntary servitude, which is a form of now, and I'll just mention this and move on. The ILO, the International Labor Organization, has now put a new category, kind of a fourth form of human trafficking called forced marriage. So forced marriage has also been put into there. And while that's typically, not exclusively, but typically going to be a foreign issue, offshore issue, forced marriage is a huge issue globally. So they put that into there as well. Trafficking globally. What are some of the dollars that are out there? I'm going to give you the latest, not 10-year data, because we use 10-year data for 10 years. Since 2014 to 2024, we used 150 billion, which is terrible. 150 billion, that's a horrible number, but that's how much human trafficking generated globally, and we had about 20 million victims. The latest data that's coming out now that you see that the International Labor Organization updated just in 2024. So they didn't come out with a new report, a huge report, but they updated sections inside there. This is the updating that they did. They are 20 plus million victims in 2014, 150 billion. Look at where the 2024 report is. 49.6 million victims.
Wow.
Over double just in those 10 years. In a decade, they have now determined there's more than twice as many victims, and $236 billion being generated every year. Look at the increase, 37% increase, again, in 10 years. And numbers like this, being somebody who is very poor, because I work for the government all my life, so I'm just a poor individual. I can't think in terms of $336 billion. I mean, those are numbers that stagger my mind, or $236 billion, but think about that. Put it into the perspective that kind of makes sense to me. That's bigger than Google, that's bigger than Apple, that's bigger than Exxon, that's bigger than these huge global enterprises that we think about as big money makers globally, human trafficking is bigger than all those. Now, what does that mean? If human trafficking is a bigger money maker than some of these global enterprises that we just talked about, think about that. Think about the money that's being made. Think about the dollars that are involved in this. How much money is being moved globally through these dark markets. So where does that put human trafficking in criminal activity? It's number 2. Drugs is number 1. So drug trafficking is still number 1. Human trafficking is number 2. And weapons, guns, gun trafficking is number 3. So that kind of gives you a hierarchy of trafficking and human trafficking. Most experts believe that within 10 years, human trafficking will be number 1. Why? Why would it be number 1? The answer is pretty simple. It's the recycling. Dope, you use it one time and it's gone. If I sell you a little bit of cocaine, you snort it, shoot it, do whatever you're going to do with it. Once you use that product is consumed, right? If I sell you pills from a pill mill, you pop those pills, take those pills over 30 days. When those pills are gone, they're consumed. That consumable is gone forever. A human being is sold over and 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 over again and again and again. And some victims that we know report that they were sold 12 to 25 times a night. 6 days a week. Sometimes the trafficker give them 1 day off. And sometimes not. 12 to 25 times a night that they're being sold. Now, a survivor that I know makes this statement. She's now married, has children, and she'll make this statement when she's talking, and I have always this has always impacted me. She said, I love my husband, but not 12 to 25 times a night. But we were forced to do that to just make money. And the trauma that inflicts, not just mentally, because there's a huge mental trauma, as you can imagine, right? But what about the physical trauma? What about so many of the survivors who can't have children, who want families but can't have children because of what happened to them? Look at the tearing and the trauma and the breaking down of just the human psyche, emotions, and physical body. So that's what we're dealing with. So most experts believe that within 10 years, it will supersede even drug trafficking. And a lot of gangs, TCOs, which are transnational criminal organizations, NCO, national criminal organizations, a lot of them are really moving a lot of their operations out of still doing the dope, but moving into human trafficking as well. And that's really taking up a bulk of what they're doing because of the ability to make money over and over and over again. The NASDAQ estimates that it's $346 billion. Now, the NASDAQ's our financial market, right? And they estimated at $346 billion a year. And that's out of about 1.2 trillion criminal activity. So our government puts out something called a TIP report, put it out every year. Usually in July, it drops. This is not this most recent, but the one before that. And they kind of look at the countries of the world and they put them on a ranking of what they're doing about human trafficking. So you can see the greens, the reds. I find this to be really interesting because the reds are those tier 3 countries. Tier 3 countries are even considered to be governments are complicit in the sale of human beings in the country that they promoted by their governments. Look how many red countries are over there. That old Soviet Union, solid red, right? Russia, China, and again, a lot of that will be labor trafficking, but you can see where that trafficking is coming from. Ukraine, because of the war with Russia and Ukraine, the displacement of those populations. Can you imagine children that come out of Ukraine from the war? Women that flee out of there and now are left with nothing? Their families are gone, their houses are gone, and guess what? Traffickers were waiting for them at the border to begin to recruit them and put them into, quote unquote, the life, and to sell them globally for sure. The United States, by the way, when you look at the world, when you talk about consuming, if I were to put the consuming map up here, which would be in blues, would be consuming countries, our country is considered to be a top-tier consuming country in the world. We consume more victims of human trafficking, labor, and sex than any other country in the world. Now, I don't know what that does to you, but that makes me angry. We're the land of the free and the home of the brave, and we are consuming human beings, people that are made in the image of their Creator, and we're consuming them at a higher rate than any other country in the world. There's something wrong about that, which is why groups like this, people like you that are sitting in this room and watching, it's so critical that we become engaged in this fight. Not just sitting on the outside, but engaged. We're a top-tier consuming country. And so if we're a top-tier consuming country, where? Where in our country is it happening? And here's the heat map. So where does this heat map come from? So this heat map comes from Polaris. So Polaris, at least up until a few days ago, ran the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And that contract was awarded to another organization out of Texas, which will be picking that up starting October 1. The number remains the same, and we'll share the number with you. But Polaris would bring in those calls to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and they would generate a heat map of where the calls are coming from. Now, I want to be very clear, because this is important. We are not saying this is where all the cases are, because we don't know. We don't know where all the victims are, because we don't know. The data's just not there to give us a clear picture. What we can do is say this is where the calls are coming from. And so there's probably somewhat of a correlation there, I would think. There's a correlation between if there's calls coming in, there must be some activity there. So, but that's, I want to make it very clear, this is calls. But I want you to take a look at two things. First of all, look at the seaboards. The eastern seaboard, the western seaboard, and the Gulf of America. I'm getting better at that. And I still slip every once in a while, but the Gulf of America. And so the Gulf of America, look at how red hot those seaboards are. Federal law enforcement would tell you that's a clue. And I say that in jest because I have to dig at the feds every once in a while. So the feds will look at that and go, I think that's a clue. Yes, that is a clue. So you have the seaboards. Look at the state of Florida. Red hot. Texas, California, New York. Look at those seaboards. If you looked at states and how they rank, somebody mentioned about the county, and again, I don't think we really are certain where that data is coming from. We're going to try to find that because I really want to know sourcing. But the source I can give you here from Polaris is that calls to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, where are they at? Where's Florida? Florida ranks number 3. California would be 1. Texas would be 2. Florida ranks 3. New York typically ranks 4. So those are population centers, right? It's after 4, though, it just kind of spreads throughout the United States. It don't make sense anymore for population. But in those first 4 states, population centers kind of follow that trending as well. But Florida ranks. Where in Florida? And I don't know if I put the slide in here. Where in Florida does it happen? Let's see if yes, I did put it in there. So here's where it's happening in Florida.
Wow. Sarasota.
I see Spring Hill right up there on the edge of a hot spot. I think if you would look at the newest data, some of the south part of Hernando would be included now. This is a couple year old data right here. I think we would be, because it's always inching out as populations spread. And are we in a population boom here in Hernando?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. And so you're seeing those populations. Miami-Dade typically is number 1 for reporting. Orlando is number 2, and then Tampa Bay area, which usually is considered 5 counties, although now task force wise we're looking at 7 counties, but typically that Tampa Bay area is reporting at 3rd. So we're the 3rd highest reporting state, and the Tampa Bay area is the 3rd highest reporting area within that high. Yes.
So my understanding, and tell me if I'm wrong, because I'm trying to understand it, if we do our job in reporting it, and because we're noticing it more and more, because what you're teaching us, we should turn that Spring Hill into red. on this map.
Without a doubt.
And that's what
you-
we're looking for.
And you say why? Because we're reporting.
Because we're
Yeah.
reporting it.
So the more we report, the more red that area gets. So I would love to see Hernando get red,
And then
not
like
because we're a big trafficking county, but because we're a big reporting county. We see something, we're reporting it. And so I'd love to see us go red, and then what happens, it goes red, and then it begins to cool down
That's
because
when
we
we're doing
begin
our
to
job.
talk to the problem after we're doing our job. Yeah, I love that theory. I like the way that operation goes. So you can see a little bit where the hot spots are here in Florida. The human trafficking triad. Now, before I get to this, and we start looking at some questions and things, I have just given you a bunch of stats, right? Data. Stats. And I've told you where they come from. There's other stats out there. And we could probably spend a long time talking about those as well. But I gave you some good data, some good stats, showed you some things up on the screen that kind of reflect what that data is. There are two things about data that I think is important for us to first of all, I think the first thing is that it can be mind numbing, right? You hear a lot of numbers. The next thing you know, the numbers kind of seem overwhelming. It's like, what can I do about all those numbers? What can I do against a $336 billion industry? What can I do with 49.6 million victims from the ILO? What can I do? It seems to be overwhelming. I think probably the second issue, which I would consider to be even more mind-numbing than that, is that by looking at numbers like that, we can have the opportunity in our minds to dehumanize the human aspect. Because every one of those numbers is not just a data point in a spreadsheet somewhere, but it's a human being. I've carried them out of the houses. Picked them up. I've held them close to my bulletproof Kevlar vest and walked out of the doors looking in the faces of people who have been ravaged in ways that we can't even imagine. And as I looked into their eyes, I saw what I can only describe as kind of empty pools where a soul used to be, where life used to be, where joy used to be in a child has now been turned into terror, trauma, trouble. I've carried it. So I think it's always important that in the middle of talking about this issue, how big it is, how overwhelming it is, how troubling, because it is, all of those things are true, but in the end, it's a human being who loves, feels, laughs, just like we do. They hurt, just like we do. So after giving you this large data set, I think it's important to hear the human side of this. What is it like to be a human in the middle of all that data? I've asked tonight for a dear friend of mine to be here, and this friend of mine is a survivor. She is a survivor of these things that we just talked about. The things that we talked about here, they have absolutely happened to her. She's going to share that story with you. What we're not going to do, for those of you that are on Facebook, is we are not going to share it on Facebook because from a survivor, there's still danger out there. There could be a potential of a trafficker still being out there. There could be the potential of someone who's bought before being out there. And we would never want to do anything to reveal that identity to those that are out there. So for those of you that are on Facebook, this presentation is going to go to Paula's. And she is going to come up and share her story with us tonight. And we'll do that even before I mention her name. So we'll come back on to you. We'll come back to you in just a few minutes. But for right now, we're going to go to Paula's. Broken, as Kim put it. How do we protect ourselves and our families and our kids and our community from this ravishing thing that we call human trafficking. We're going to do that on Thursday night. I'm just going to do 2 more slides, and then we're going to take a couple of questions. If you have any questions, and Kevin can come up here with me, we'll just sit here on the stage and answer some questions, and it's going to be pretty powerful. But I want to share this slide and the next one, and we'll stop there. The human trafficking triangle. You've seen it up on the screen for a while, and this is a visual of what human trafficking is. So when we talk about human trafficking, we talk about the 3 parts of the TVPA, but this gives you a visual of what human trafficking is. We call it the triangle. On one side, you have the victim. On the other side, you have the trafficker. And on the bottom, you have the buyer. It takes those 3 actors to accomplish human trafficking. What I oftentimes tell people in settings like this, because I think this is incredibly important to understand, is that the trafficker is becoming less human. Back in the day, the trafficker was always human. It was a pimp. We referred to him as a pimp, or in the stables we referred to him as daddy, or whatever that may look like inside that stable. The trafficker today is becoming less human. What do I mean by that? Becoming more digital. We're seeing online platforms taking the place of the human trafficker and trafficking victims online. So we're seeing a turn from the human side, and we'll talk about what those stats look like on Thursday night, but the trafficker is becoming less human and becoming more digital. And I think it's important to understand. The top side of the triangle, and I have a graphic that actually shows this, but on the top side of the triangle is the supply side. So this is economics. We talked about the dollars. The bottom side is going to be the demand side. So it's supply and demand. The buyer puts in the demand, I want a child, and I want a child to have sexual relationships with. Then you have a trafficker find a victim who can meet the demand. And that's where that money transaction happens. Now, I will tell you that there is a percentage of buyers who are just deviants. They're looking for children. They want to buy a child. They don't want an adult, they just want a child. Most traffickers, though, I will tell you straight up, don't care if it's a child or an adult, as long as they're getting what they want. And to me, that's just as egregious. Because if you walk out on the market and try to buy another human being and you just don't care, as long as you get what you want, what a pathetic human response that is to the trauma of another human being. So now I'm gonna say this tonight, and we'll talk more about this on Thursday as well. But if you look at that triangle, and you guys all know this because again you're bored to death tonight, because it's like we've heard all this before, because you've been around me for 2 or 3 years. But if you look at this triangle, and I always ask this question, which of those 3, if we wanted to collapse human trafficking, if we want to take human trafficking and collapse it to nothing, end human trafficking, of those 3 sides of the triangle, which one could we collapse that would collapse human trafficking?
The buyer.
The buyer.
We're pretty smart.
Yeah, you guys learn well.
They've been paying attention.
So, and I say this oftentimes too, because we could put a law enforcement operation together, and we do. Put law enforcement operations together, go out and arrest traffickers. We could arrest every single trafficker, well, we can't, but if we could, arrest every single trafficker in America tonight and put them in jail, would we stop trafficking?
No.
Maybe for an hour or 2, maybe for a day, maybe. And there's going to be another trafficker step right in and say, I'm going to fill that, right? They're standing in line waiting. If we were to put an operation together with NGOs and direct service providers, and we went out there and recovered every single victim of human trafficking, got every one of them, and put them in safe houses and put them in recovery centers and all those kind of things, would we stop human trafficking?
No, because there's always another one.
Probably less time than the trafficker side, because it wouldn't be long before there'd be another vulnerable individual who's going to be either snatched or lured into the life and going to fulfill that role. So we're not going to stop it. However, if I can arrest every buyer or stop every buyer from putting money into the triangle, at that point the traffickers, there's no money. There's no reason for me to go out and recruit a victim because nobody's buying. So the buyer is really where the key is. The demand side is the key to this. And again, we'll talk more about this on Thursday, but one of the problems we have in Florida is we're not serious about the buyer. We are not serious about holding the buyer accountable. So now if you buy a child in Florida, we get really serious because now you get a capital, it could be a capital offense. If the child is 12 or under, disabilities, there's certain criteria, but if you meet, it could be a capital offense. You could be put to death now for buying a child or trafficking a child in Florida. So I'm all for it. I don't have a problem with that. But I still ask the legislature, what about the buyer, the one who's buying the adults, who oftentimes were put into the life as a child, and they're just living out that traumatic experience. So you know, in Florida right now, if you're a buyer of an adult, so if you buy a human being in the state of Florida and get caught, which is rare, but if you get caught in the state of Florida, you get a misdemeanor. But if the victim gets caught, they get a felony. So we arrest the victim, they get a felony, we arrest the buyer, and they get a misdemeanor. Now you tell me if that's justice.
Absolutely not.
So we have been fighting for years at the legislature. And if you're on Facebook, legislator, I'll be coming to visit you in the next week or two. And I'll be in Tallahassee. And you're going to hear me as you've heard me for years. We have been asking the legislature to move that from a misdemeanor to a third-degree felony. I personally think it should be a higher felony than that, because unless you score well on a third-degree felony, you're not going to get any jail time, even on a third-degree felony. So the point being is, but it sends a message that Florida's not going to tolerate the buying of another human being. So we've got to make those changes and really go after the buyer. My last slide for you tonight, the 4 stages of human trafficking. I want to lay this in tonight as kind of a launching place for what we're going to do on Thursday night, which is talk about protecting. These are the 4 stages of human trafficking. I want to go through them very quickly. Recruiting, grooming, trafficking, and immersion. Now, it's important to recognize that these don't necessarily move linear. It's typically circular. What do I mean by that? Recruiting is where the vulnerabilities, as you heard our survivor talk about tonight, is where those vulnerabilities are being assessed. The trafficker says, you are beautiful. Oh, boom, the hook is in. Vulnerabilities are being assessed. Grooming is what happened after, you heard in the survivor story as well, is that grooming is where the victim who's been recruited, the vulnerabilities have been assessed and identified. They now begin to groom, slowly condition the victim, and that's a time-sensitive thing. Some victims are just like that. Others, they'll recruit and groom for months to bring them into the life. So it can go from almost immediate to months of grooming. But grooming is where they're being conditioned to come into the life. Trafficking is where the money's being made, and most of that's happening online now. We'll talk about that on Thursday. Trafficking is where, immersion is what you heard the term, the bottom. Immersion is where somebody's been in the life long enough that they actually become part of the criminal enterprise. And when they become part of the criminal enterprise, they actually commit criminal acts. So they're going to do shoplifting, they're going to do drug muling, they're going to do fleeing and eluding, they're going to do recruiting in the jail and recruiting out on the street, they're going to do grooming. So they're going to be part of that criminal enterprise, actually committing criminal offenses, which again we'll talk about a little bit more on Thursday night, but makes it very difficult for law enforcement, for prosecutors, because if a bottom gets arrested, they've committed a lot of criminal acts, they got a lot of criminal acts on them. What do we treat them as? A criminal, or do we treat them as a victim? And that's a difficult thing, right? That's because the law says they're a criminal. You violated the criminal code. You need to go to jail. You've got felonies that you got. But we all know that they were brought into the life as a victim. And oftentimes they're just surviving, just trying to get to the bottom status so that they can survive a little easier than they would if they came in as the young recruit, the young groomed victim coming in to the stable. So it's a very difficult place for law enforcement, for prosecutors to treat. And I've talked to prosecutors. I've had prosecutors call me and say, hey, I've got this person telling me this, and this, and I don't really know what to do with this. Does that ring true? And oh yeah, it rings true. And thankfully they're calling and asking those questions, because in times past, oftentimes it's like, nope, you did the shoplifting, you're on the video, boom, you're going to prison. Because that's your 4th offense in the last year. So we're just going to go ahead and put time on you this time. So that's a very difficult place for law enforcement and for prosecutors. We'll talk a little bit more about that on Thursday. So here's what I'm going to do now, just for about. Oh man, it's already 7:30. I almost took up all the time. I was really getting done early. So what we'll do is we will finish up early. Then Kim, come up here with me for just a second. And so Kim will come up here. And we'll just kind of.
Stop, wait.
You want me to shut this off or?
It's okay, it's not my story.
Yeah. Yeah, so now we're just two experts talking. So I think for just a couple of minutes, maybe for 3 or 4 questions at the most. Anybody have any questions for either Kim or myself? Or both?
I got one. The statistics that you showed for 2024. You were an officer and you guys work with the feds and you know how they all think. But the way I think is those numbers were always here. It's just we're getting better at identifying it and acting on it.
I agree. Totally agree.
That's what I was asking.
Trafficking's always been here. I think the numbers are always there. We're getting better. And USF just created a report for the state of Florida. Anybody can assess that, and I would encourage you to do so. It's a great report. It's the 2025, it's actually covered 2024, released in July of 2025, so just a couple of months ago. And it is the first data report for the state of Florida on human trafficking that has any credibility. So USF did it. The Florida legislature gave them money, as well as the feds gave USF money to create what's known as a TIP lab, Trafficking in Persons Lab, and the state is requiring anyone that receives federal dollars or state dollars to report their data to this TIP center. And they created, using 18 months of data, they created this first. It has things in it like this, and I'll just give you one of the stats, which I found to be just, even for somebody who's worked this for these many years. In this data report, they were able to discover that Florida, in the state of Florida, within the state of Florida, we posted over 340,000 sex ads in 90 days.
What?
340,000 new sex ads in the state of Florida in 90 days. Anybody want to guess what location was number 1?
Nothing.
Anybody but Alyssa?
Right.
Tallahassee.
Pasco.
Miami.
Rome.
Tallahassee.
Orlando.
Jacksonville.
Wow.
That was kind of surprising to me. I mean, I was kind of surprised by that.
Yeah.
But it's a big military base, and it's, you know, there's probably some dynamics there, although we have McNeil here.
Yeah.
And anywhere there's military bases, by the way, just so you know, there's a lot of IMBs. There's a lot of illicit massage businesses because they're videotaping those young sailors and airmen and military people when they come into those places. They're being videotaped. Most people don't realize that. You go in there and you lay down on that bed and get your happy ending. You think, boy, this was kind of a cool event. You just went on videotape, and guess where your video is? In
China
Beijing,
right now.
China.
Oh my.
Because I was in the one in Pasco, and I called the sheriff and told him, said, "You're not going to believe what I just found out." I asked him, "Where's the box? Where's the videotapes? I want to see the videotape." You'd see them in the rooms. I said, "Where's the videotape?" And that young lady, through an interpreter, told me, "Boss has it." I said, "Tell the boss I want him here. I want to talk to your boss now." And she said, "Boss not here." Okay, tell boss to come here. I want to talk to your boss. Boss is in China. So my point, it's like the sheriff and I were talking about, it was more than just a sex operation, it was a national security issue. Because can you guess a young lieutenant going in there and getting on video, and now he gets promoted, and 20 years from now he's an admiral, and they sit on that data till then, and all of a sudden the phone rings and say, "Hey, I've got a video of you getting a happy ending at Lily's Massage." Well, that happened to it. Yep, I'm going to release it if you don't do this. So these are when we talk about this, the human toll, as we heard tonight, is I think needs to be the priority that we need to look at. What's it doing to the human being? When you look beyond that, though, what's it doing to our community? What's it doing to our families? What's it doing to our nation? I think we have to ask those questions as well. And the truth of the matter is, it's affecting all of it. And you're exactly right. It's always been here. I think we're getting better. So I would encourage you to go to USF, to the TIP lab at USF. download the report, it's available to the public, and it's a great report to really get some more data for what it looks like in the state of Florida.
So these guys going to them, they are told about this, that this will happen if you go to a massage.
Well, we
parlor.
would hope so. And they certainly have the information, so we're hoping that, yes. Any other questions? Yes,
Not really a question, but a thought. My brother works in pest control, and he once told me if you see a roach, you have to eradicate the whole house, because for every one you see, there's 100 you don't. And I kind of see that as victims. Every victim that I see, every victim that we save, there's 100 that we're missing. So when you go into a place and you find a victim and you help them, what is in place to span out to help us find the other victims? Are there like processes in place or some kind of span out idea?
okay. Kim works in that space now. You want to take that?
Sure. Yeah, and you are correct. Both
Totally
of you
correct.
actually are right. And just keep in mind, that's just what's reported. So like you're saying, what about all the ones that are not reported, right? So typically, yes, when we find one, we know to continue to keep looking and searching, because usually where there's one victim, there is 5 other victims, right? But there's resources in place. Once those victims are extracted from that situation, we immediately compile services, what they need, taking it from the top down. So for instance, like if they're addicted to drugs and alcohol or whatnot, we start with substance abuse, therapy, safe homes, and we continue down the totem pole, because you got to take care of the top issue. So we make sure that we get all the resources in place for that kiddo or young adult, whatever it be. And then again, so law enforcement will take it, and I mean, dude, I can't even sit here and explain to you. I've seen it, but I can't tell you everything on the backside of it. But the way that they're able to just start knocking down the dominoes after that, and I will tell you, if there's more, they get them all. And sometimes people are like, well, but you're not moving fast enough. Why are you not doing something? I mean, I've seen it time and time on cases where a compiled of information will come through to them and they want them to act right away. But it's a strategic process to ensure that they do it effectively and with a lot of care, so that way this guy's not getting a little slap on the hand and getting out 2 days later, and to ensure that 1, they're getting all the victims, and the victims will have the proper resources in places, and 2, so that they can ensure that every single criminal is held to justice. So it does on both sides. We make sure the victims are taken care of through NGOs and partners that we have, and then we also make sure that every single criminal is caught. And sometimes we'll slap them with charges right away, that we can at least put them behind bars to keep the girls safe or whatnot. But then others will come as the more that they're digging and unpiling all this evidence, then more charges will come later.
Is there any kind of, one word I think was punishment to a victim that won't speak up? Like we've identified that they're a victim, they're going through help, but they won't say whether there's others, they won't say who victimized them.
Yeah. So here's a couple things. So a lot of people tend to think that, right? And I get it. Sometimes I have to put prosecutors in their place and tell them, calm down, hold on, this is a victim, it's a human life we're dealing with. But ultimately, no, there's no punishment for them. Can we make the case stronger? 100%, right? If the victim cooperates and if she's able to make it to trial. But it's my #1 goal that victim never has to go to trial. So I want to ensure that every piece of evidence that I can help law enforcement collect that would secure that case and make it as strong as possible, we're going to do it, right? And then if she has to go to trial, that's where the NGOs or somebody like myself would step in and be able to support that victim with the proper resources and the proper, I would build her up basically to the point where if she were to have to go to trial, I'm going to make sure she's strong enough and make sure that she knows that she's not standing in that trial alone. So it's really just building them to a place to where they can withstand that. But punishment, no, there's no punishment. It's just you make a stronger case if you have to go there. But my #1 goal is definitely, again, I never want to put my victim on that stand if I have to, because the defense attorney is going to tear my victim apart. Mm-hmm. And so I don't want him or her to have to go through that. But ultimately, yeah, I just do whatever.
And I think
have to
old
do.
school law enforcement really would try to do everything they could do to compel
Right.
the victim to spill the beans per se.
It's like on TV you see,
Yeah.
tell me who your
Yeah.
pimp
Yeah.
is, or.
And that was, we're starting to
Old
learn,
school.
Yeah.
we're starting to learn that, our #1 priority should be her or his well-being, first
Yeah.
of all. Let's get them taken care of. Typically what you find is as they get stabilized and they kind of get out of that trauma bonding gets broken and they start moving into that healing and health phase, they typically want a sense of justice.
Yeah.
So they want, but it's really hard for them to even view that when they're still, their teeth are knocked out and they've been beaten and they haven't eaten well in a long time, and their kids are still being, they feel like their kids are still being used to coerce them. So until you get all those pieces there in that healing process, stabilization, they're not good witnesses anyway at that point. So the idea has been, let's take care of them first. And then, as Kim said, you had these advocates that come in and start walking beside them, and a lot of times you can start making, and it may not even be a human trafficking case at that point, it may be a RICO.
Right.
Or it could be a different charge that you're able to still get justice without her being dragged through the court system, if possible.
Yeah.
So we want her to be as good, and I'm talking almost selfishly now from a law enforcement perspective, and this is almost going to sound inhumane, and I don't mean it to be that way, and I think you know that of me, that I really want the human being to be taken care of. But as law enforcement trying to go after and get the bad guy who's done bad things, I need the victim to be as good of a witness, as good of a on the stand or giving information or whatever as possible, and we'll never get that unless they've been through a stabilization process.
Well, this is a hard question for you, because we're seeing two different sides. We got the victim, we got law enforcement. And you put up where you have triangle, victim, trafficker, and buyer. And we talked about taking off one of them if it would fix the problem, which we know it's not going to. If we chip away at all three of them, that will fix the problem as well. We take away. The one thing that I haven't heard from Warrior 321 is we hear about how to identify the problem, which way to go to correct the problem, or report the problem. But what about the education for children?
Yeah.
I mean, in your case, if you were taught everything that you know now as a child, maybe not in the graphic sense that we're talking to about adults, do you think you might have been able to head that off beforehand?
So,
I mean, it's a hard question, I understand,
yeah,
but
I'm gonna be transparent with you. I'm not gonna sugarcoat anything.
yeah.
Number one, it is getting into our children now. I mean, it's still been a hard fought battle, right? Because the school system fights us and parents fight us. I don't want you teaching my kid that. Okay, well,
And we
blow
were
snow over
part of
here.
that, by the way, let's say that.
Yeah.
All of you were, Warrior was.
Yep, and the thing of it is if we're not teaching our kiddos, right, Johnny Boy's teaching. And so somebody's talking to our kids. So we are getting it in, for the one part of your question, we're getting it into them. But transparently, would it have helped me? No, I had too many vulnerabilities. I could not control what my abusers were doing to me. So I still feel like we gotta educate our community, because I need more teachers like Miss Brooks, I'll never forget her name, that reported the initial CPS report. So we need more adults that can step in and see the red flags, see the signs, because I'm not gonna speak up. A victim never speaks up. I didn't even know I was a victim.
Yeah.
You know, I've been taught, just keep your mouth shut, sit down, be quiet.
And and then you hear that's common, very common.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
even know I was a
I
victim.
can understand that. But we should still attack it the way we've been attacking it,
Sure.
at all three angles,
Sure.
instead of just focusing on one.
And we are. It's
Yep.
just, school system is really hard to get into, but we're
Yeah.
making waves. We've hit some legislation that's allowed it in, so we're finally we're getting up there. It's like a roller coaster, like them old ones, it's like, we're just not at the top and rolling down yet, but we're getting there.
Yeah, and I would,
Yeah.
As you read grooming, it hits that point, because I'm reading that. Potential victim, grooming is typically gradual. Mental conditioning, to treat that as normal. Do you not see this in everything that's going on in the schools? Shame on them.
Yeah. And the schools, I try to give a little bit of grace to them, because I know they're under mandates to do a lot of things. But what we have asked is that in the middle of doing everything that you're doing, the kids need to be aware that this is out there. So the schools are mandated now to do that. We just got new law this year, which Warrior 321 was part of that as well, where anyone in the school system that has access to the kids an employee, has to have human trafficking training now.
Yes.
And that actually kicks in December 1st.
That's right.
So, you know, that's every janitor, that's cafeteria staff, that's school nurses, that's counselors, everybody has to have human trafficking training now, because the idea is we need more than just the kid to get trained. We need the ecosystem around the kid to have the training as well, so that when the kid comes and reports, hey, something happened to me, and we need the janitor to be able to say, oh yeah, I've had training on it, so let's get that done. So we're getting there, but boy, is it slow.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's in the school systems, as you said, but as part of your story, you said when you went to prison as a teenager, it just got worse and you were mistreated. Is there systems, legislations, or anything going on with our prison system so that they can see the young women and men that are coming into the prison systems now?
There it is. So, again, slower than we want it to be, but we're starting to get, so like DJJ, she mentioned DJJ, which is Department of Juvenile Justice, so that's where, quote unquote, and I'm using the quotes now, because I would never label this, but the bad kids, the worst of the worst, we're gonna put them in lockdown facilities. But they actually have human trafficking coordinators from the state level now, who are developing programs within even DJJ to try to intervene in their lives, because a lot of those have been trafficked. So we're making progress. Again, it's not as fast as we all want it to be, because it's not a perfect system. We're always trying to add to it. But the encouraging thing for me is that we're not being shut down. It's slower than we want to be, but we're starting to get to these multiple phases of making, because what we need this kind of educational response to be community-wide, which means the trades need to be aware, the schools need to be aware, law enforcement needs to be aware, the judges need to be aware, the juries, which is why it's important we get this information out to the public. The public should be in this room tonight, hearing this. Why? Because they may be called to serve on a jury one day, and the worst thing that can happen is for a juror to walk in and human trafficking, I think that was Taken. I saw the movie Taken, so that's what human trafficking is, and that's not what human trafficking is. So now you spend 2 days of the trial trying to educate the jurors on what human trafficking really looks like, because it's not Taken, it really is something else. So that's why we're doing what we do, and it's a slow process. But if I can get a jury pool that's heard this when they're called in, man, we're way ahead.
I think jury duty on the 20th.
Human trafficking case, I think we got it. All right, one more question, because I know we need to get out here, get wrapped up.
I have something very encouraging to share.
Okay.
We recently took a trip to Connecticut and we stayed in a higher end hotel. The two trips, higher end hotel. The lobby bathroom had one of those trafficking things,
Yep.
who to call.
Yep.
And when victim's story was being shared tonight, I was thinking if that had been in that lobby bathroom,
Yeah,
there would have been somewhere to go.
yeah.
That feeling of I got nowhere to go maybe could have dissolved a little bit.
Yeah.
To see that in a high end, they're all about how they look. This ugly posters in that beautiful bathroom. Just to see it there was it was warming for me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
and to both of your points, that's exactly, it's unfortunate, but when I was younger, and even in my young adult years, there was none of this.
Right.
There was no coordinators, there was no signs in the bathrooms, and I was trafficked through airports and high-end hotels and casinos and you name it. I mean,
So if you
I
guys
worked
want
in
to know
all
who
the
to
high-end strip
support,
clubs and the
that was a
high-end
Residence
escorts.
Marriott.
So, yeah,
Good.
yeah, I mean, if these things would have been there, I could have probably looked up on a bathroom stall and been like, yeah, I can get some help
They
tonight.
didn't even
There
care
was
that it was
no
ugly.
help.
They didn't care that it was ugly.
Yeah,
They
no
belong
laws, no help, so.
I saw one more hand. This will be the last one.
Okay, so you guys have been in this fight, two different, stories of how you're in this fight. What is something that you can tell the public and sit here and be like, okay, we hit these roadblocks all the time, and it is really hard, but having support and having what else, and just speaking to the public of how can people get involved and why should they keep going, even though there's all these barriers that you come across?
Sure. So I would say, when we stop, we give up, and there's no justice. There's nobody fighting for the victims that are still out there that need us, right? So that would be what I would say to the public is keep getting educated. Continue to learn more. Continue to, if you see something, say something, report it. Like, don't just take the information, take it home, stick it in your pocket. Oh yeah, that was great tonight. that's a real great presentation, or, you know, or a lot of times people will see it out in the public eye and they'll really just walk right past it and it's none of my business. Okay, yeah, but that's somebody's life. So, I mean, make it your business, you know what I mean? And you can report anonymously. Like, you don't have to sit there and give your whole name out. So that's what I would say, is continue to educate yourself, continue to book your knowledge up, and then continue to be that person that stands in the gap, because when we give up, then we're saying that no, the next life doesn't matter. And we can't do that, because that could be your granddaughter or your daughter or, you know, your great daughter. I mean, it just, right? Your niece, your nephew. So we cannot give up, because the next generation depends on us. And we have to stand there for them.
And my biggest barrier would be the Constitution. And I don't mean that in a negative way, because I'm glad we have the Constitution. But from law enforcement, I have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, right? So you're looking at victims being stabilized enough if they need to participate in their own trial. We have, you know, the trafficker has rights, the attorneys, and the lack of judicial knowledge, the jury pools not being really aware. The Constitution is the barrier, and it's a good barrier, but it's probably my biggest barrier, because I may know that this person's a trafficker, I may know that this person's a buyer, but I have to be able to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. So that barrier kind of holds me back. So what I find is the solution to that is an educated community, an educated public, who can put pressure beyond just the law enforcement avenues. We need to be putting pressure business-wise. If you're going to be a trafficking organization, or you're not taking it serious, we're not going to spend our money there. So we need a community that's engaged, empowered with the knowledge, so that from multiple levels, from a civil cause of action to a criminal cause of action, to using our money to support good organizations that are trauma-informed and trauma-centered and really care about this in their communities. So that's why it's important that we have events like this right here, making sure that we're educating the public so that we can fight this on multiple fronts and not just depend on law enforcement to get us out of this mess. Because if we're depending on law enforcement to get us out of this mess, it'll never happen. It's going to take all of us engaged to do this. So, all right, thank you so much. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, everybody.